And welcome back to Hofstra's Morning Wake-Up Call. Foreign Hussein, Pete Papazoglu, Jennifer Hillman here with you on this Wednesday edition of the Wake-Up Call. Now, we were discussing this earlier, guys. The celebrations after the death of Osama bin Laden. How appropriate was it? Was it right, morally correct, if you could even say? And now we're joined right now by Arthur Lieber, who's the director of Civitas, a nonprofit organization that provides students with educational opportunities that promotes local and global citizenship. Arthur, thank you for your time.
Hi, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. Now, basically, what we're talking about here is shortly after President Obama announced the killing of Osama bin Laden, national networks began broadcasting celebrations all over the country. Here in New York, we had it down at Ground Zero, in Times Square, and then in D.C. outside of the White House, even in Pennsylvania. A majority of the celebrations were by college-age students, young adults. I want to get your thoughts on that first and foremost.
Well, I think what happened Sunday evening, it was not the same thing as if the Yankees or even the Mets had won the World Series, where it's kind of like, go crazy, folks, go crazy, folks. It was really an important global event. And I think when that occurs, it's really important to take time to sit back and to reflect about what happened. And I think more of that's coming out now, questions of whether pictures should be released, and just really, will there be blowback from this whole incident? And I think that we have a tendency in the country to, want to feel patriotic in a very demonstrative way, and there are certainly positive benefits to that. But on the other hand, particularly with college students, I'd like to think that rather than cheering, shouting, and all of that, they'd be talking with one another about what does this really mean.
Now, Arthur, how do you respond to people immediately hearing Osama bin Laden had been killed, posting on their Facebooks the news? Like, how? Because I know our age is all about Facebook and Twitter. How do you respond to that?
I guess in a generic sense, it's okay for people who are, looking at Facebook on a regular basis and not watching television. That may be the way in which they find out. Then what they do with it next, becomes another question. In other words, posting it and just giving the fact, I think that's quite all right. But I think that if you're trying to start a rally, again, you're missing a step, which is, can we think about this?
Now, okay, here's me essentially playing devil's advocate. I in a sense, I guess I am guilty of what you're talking about here. I was one of those folks who did go by Ground Zero as soon as I heard the news. It was an amazing moment. It was an amazing feeling just being there. Now, things didn't get too rowdy either. During September 11th, actually the aftermath of September 11th, we did see other countries just completely rejoicing in the fact that 3,000 American lives had been taken. We are, I guess you could say in a sense, we were rejoicing that one life had been taken, and that life was, first and foremost, America's most wanted. Secondly, responsible. He was a murderer, responsible, and the mastermind for 9/11. What would be a more appropriate action?
Well, two things. One is, I think it's fair to give New York, Washington, the Shanksville area a pass on this. I should have mentioned that earlier. Just from the time that I was in New York a month after the event, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out, the whole thing was viewed in a different way. And so, for me, in the Midwest, to try to pass judgment on the ordeal that people in New York have gone through, I think would be a little presumptuous of me. So I should qualify what I said by saying that I think under those circumstances it's more appropriate. And with regard to the second question about people in other countries cheering after 9/11, that is true, but there's a flip side to that, too, which was there was a tremendous amount of support for the United Nations, for the United States right after that, including in a number of Muslim states. And I think that if the United States policy had been somewhat similar to what the Israeli Mossad did after Munich, which is we're going to track down the perpetrators of this, not go to war with anybody, but instead we're going to bring to justice the people who are responsible for this, however long it takes. I think that there would have been a lot more global support for the U.S. In the long run. But there was tremendous support for the country right after 9/11, with a few exceptions.
Now, obviously, a lot of people were celebrating because Osama bin Laden was killed, but also how much of it do you think it was that it was such a huge win for the United States against terrorism? I mean, this is a person that we've been chasing now for 10 years, and to finally get him, and obviously, yes, he was murdered, but to get him and to get this win over terrorism, how much do you think people might have been celebrating that instead of just the fact that he's dead?
Oh, I think people do see it as a victory over terrorism. But, did you win the battle or did you win the war? What's going to come next? Is it possible that the cheering may well lead to blowback from others who really resent that? And so while I can understand people being demonstrative in the way they express themselves, I don't think, and I certainly haven't heard anyone involved with this administration or even the previous one saying, it's all over, case closed, we've won this.
You're listening to WRHU on 88.7 FM. Farhan Hussein, Jen Hillman, Pete Papazoglu with you on this Wednesday morning. We're speaking right now with Arthur Lieber, who is the director of Civitas, a nonprofit organization that provides students with educational opportunities that promote local and global citizenship. Speaking right now about, the aftermath of Osama bin Laden's death, the celebrations, to be exact. Now, you were, your quote is referring to bin Laden's death as, quote, a teachable moment. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean that there are certain events which occur through history that just are indelibly imprinted in people's minds. And certainly, where were you when you heard that Osama bin Laden was killed? Most people are going to remember that for a long time. They certainly did with 9/11. You can go back, obviously, to Pearl Harbor, to the assassination of the Kennedy brothers, Dr. King, the Challenger, and so forth. And something like Pearl Harbor, I think the natural reaction is to be really angry and then to try to mobilize. Others, I remember being in Washington, D.C. when Dr. King was assassinated, and just this horrible feeling that it was April after the summer of tremendous riots. And I was in Arlington, Virginia, and we could go up on the roof of the building and just see D.C., and you knew it was going to blow. You knew there was going to be rioting, which there was in D.C. and 100 other cities. And again, understandable, but not particularly productive. And so I think that it becomes a teachable moment when you compare these different seminal experiences, and then you talk about, well, what are the options which exist, and what has been gained and what has been lost. And I hope that the teachers do take the opportunity to look at this, and while there will be a certain element of joy, also there's another factor of risk, and to talk it through, because critical analysis is so important, critical thinking to all parts of education, and these sorts of events, which really draw in students' attention, I think are ideal times to try to help kids hone their critical thinking skills.
Now, thinking maybe on a little bit of a more broader basis and looking at America and not just the students, could this be a teachable moment for them too, thinking that now as we see the days go on, people obviously are still happy that he's dead, but at the same time maybe saying that they're not celebrating so much because of the death of another human being, and thinking down the line when this may happen again that America might react a little bit differently?
I think it's possible. I mean, I think that, obviously the future, the script hasn't been written yet, and so everything is going to have its own circumstances. I mean, I think it would be interesting if President Obama announced in a week or so, without using the infamous words mission accomplished, but just said, I believe that we can begin withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. I think there would be a considerable amount of cheering on the streets as well. That would be, very different, but it would also be a way of bringing closure.
Now, you talk about President Obama there, and How do you think that the reaction might have been different if Obama had just come on our television sets and said to us that Osama bin Laden is dead, rather than say to us that the United States has led a mission and he directed them to attack and the United States military had killed them?
Well, what concerned me, and it wasn't just Sunday night, but it's all through the discussion of this. President Obama, who I regard as someone who's very compassionate and values life, and whenever he'd refer to trying to track down Osama bin Laden, he would talk about kill or capture, and that strikes me a little bit like ready, fire, aim. That I would have found it desirable if we could have captured him, and I have no way of knowing whether or not we could have, and then had a trial to really demonstrate to the world what American justice means. It gives us so much to take pride in. I don't think he could have just said Osama bin Laden is dead. I mean, there would have been the unanswered questions. But I wish that he had said that, talking about justice and there are still unanswered questions, and it's incumbent upon all of us to try to learn more about what happened and to take every step we can so that similar acts like this don't occur again. Similar acts again, meaning 9/11.
You also, and we'll wrap up after this. You also referred to the reason that your focus was on college age and young adults who celebrated was because bin Laden, in a way, represents the slaying of a childhood boogeyman of sorts. That's a very interesting statement. Can you talk quickly about that?
Well, I think we're all, it makes indelible impressions on us. Somebody who we see as really a quote evil figure when we're young, and then we embellish that image. And so, it's like dragon slaying, and I can understand that frustration. But I think it does. It can get out of hand. I remember when I was in college in D.C. in the 1960s and going to one anti-Vietnam War demonstration. And there was a guy just trying to make a living. He was selling ice cream to the demonstrators. Somebody shouted out, "Liberate the ice cream worker, liberate the ice cream worker." And a crowd descended upon him, stole all of his ice cream, threw it out to everyone else. These were the peacemakers of the world, and just abusing a poor gentleman trying to make a living. And I think ever since then, I've been a little concerned about, highly emotional demonstrations, because I think that, it's not a time when people are really exercising the best judgment.
Wow. Well, Arthur Lieber, director of Civitas. Your website, Arthur?
Well, you can go Lieber for Congress. I ran for Congress last November,
right.
And I'm putting together a new one in unlikelycandidate.com. I have a book out about that. And the one other thing I just want to say with regard to that is I talk about being somewhat of an introverted person, and I think an introverted person, upon hearing about the death of bin Laden, might be just sitting at home and saying, yes, and taking it in, and not feeling that they have to, hit the streets, but they are really processing it in a way that's very personal for them.
All right. So your book is An Unlikely Candidate, Reflections of My Run for Congress, about your 2010 run for Missouri 2nd District congressional seat. And that's available to purchase on Amazon.com. Again, Arthur Lieber, director of Civitas. Thank you so much for your time, really, for the insight, clearing up a lot of questions that we had.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm very thankful that you're looking into this subject and gave me an opportunity to address it.
Great, thank you. Well, we're going to take a quick promo break, and we'll be back right after this.